The loss of Jerusalem continued to trouble the people of Europe, so in 1198 Pope Innocent III proclaimed a Fourth Crusade. The Pope called for the reconquest of Jerusalem. Those who could not fight should fast and pray. King Richard I died before he could take part, so the Fourth Crusade ended up being led not by kings, but by powerful lords. The idea remained that it would be impossible to take and hold Jerusalem while the Turks retained power. So the plan was to travel by sea to capture Egypt before going to the Holy Land. A fleet of ships and provisions were gathered in Venice, enough for over 33,000 men. Unfortunately, this was a gross overestimation, for only a third of that number showed up. Consequently, the Crusaders could not pay their bill to the Venetians. The Crusaders had the choice either to dissolve the crusade or help the Venetians reclaim the city of Zara to help offset the debt. Since Zara was a Christian city, Pope Innocent III would not allow a Christian crusade to be used to fight other Christians. The Pope sent word that attacking Zara would bring excommunication on all those involved. Some of the Crusaders did not take part, but many of the Crusaders helped the Venetians capture Zara anyway. Some appealed to the Pope for forgiveness afterward, and the penalty of excommunication was lifted, but the Venetians refused to admit wrong. Still under the pressure to complete paying off their debt, the Crusaders were asked to help Alexius Angelus, a former Byzantine emperor now in exile, to return to Constantinople and reclaim his right as emperor. The promise of money, alliance with the Byzantines, and more soldiers for their crusade was stronger than Pope Innocent's opposition to the crusade being used for this purpose. The Crusaders thought that they could perform a good deed, save themselves from poverty, and strengthen the crusade. Pope Innocent insisted that they were not to seize or plunder Greek lands, but the Crusaders assumed upon the word of Alexius that there would be no need to attack Constantinople. Thus the crusade escorted Alexius to Constantinople, but the people of Constantinople did not immediately accept him back. The crusade ended up having to attack the city before Alexius regained the position of emperor. The crusade then wished to leave immediately for Egypt, the crusade's original purpose, but were forced to stay as Alexius tried to make good on his promises. Alexius became greatly unpopular to his own people, as he even destroyed church items like chalices and icons in an attempt to pay his debt to the Crusaders. In the meantime, a small group of the Westerners set fire to a mosque, which inadvertently spread into one of the worst urban fires in history. Feeling slighted by the emperor, Crusaders began raiding the land to pay themselves. Even the bishops in the crusade justified an attack on the city. The ordinary Crusader soldier had no idea that the verdict of their bishops contradicted the commands of the Pope. The Crusaders succeeded in their attempts to take the city in 1204. What followed has become known as the sack of Constantinople. A sack of a city that resisted capture was acceptable in medieval moral code, but the Crusaders did much more than just plunder. The crusading host and the Latin refugees merged into a hideous mob driven by greed, lust, and hatred. They broke into palaces, stripped altars of precious furnishings, smashed icons for the sake of their silver and gems, and even defiled the consecrated Eucharist in precious blood. The radiant church Hagia Sophia was stripped of everything of value. Icons were shipped back to Europe, artwork was destroyed, women were molested. For most Europeans, the outcome of the Fourth Crusade was God's vengeance on the Greeks for their betrayal of the Holy Land. To the Byzantines, the sense of betrayal and anger towards the Latins continue in many even to today. To Pope Innocent, it was a grave tragedy, as he tried to offer apology. While it is something of a myth that St. John Paul II apologized for the Crusades, he was actually criticized for not including the Crusades in a list of apologies. He did apologize explicitly for the sack of Constantinople. In Athens in 2001, he apologized to the Greek people. Some memories are especially painful, and some events of the distant past have left deep wounds in the minds and hearts of the people to this day. I am thinking of the disastrous sack of the imperial city of Constantinople, which was for so long the bastion of Christianity in the East. It is tragic that the assailants, who had set out to secure free access for Christians to the Holy Land, turned against their own brothers in the faith. The fact that they were Latin Christians fills Catholics with deep regret. How can we fail to see here the mysterium iniquitatis at work in the human heart? To God alone belongs judgment, and therefore we entrust the heavy burden of the past to his endless mercy, imploring him to heal the wounds which still cause suffering to the spirit of the Greek people. Even if the idea of the Crusade was in fact a just war, there were individual actions done by Christians that were contrary to justice and morality. That is why St. John Paul II apologized, not for the Crusades themselves, but for the actions of Christians that were against the values of the gospel. Ultimately, the Fourth Crusade did nothing but weaken both the Byzantine Empire and the Crusader States. It was a disaster. In the same way, sports are meant to be a great good, but can be used for ill. If practices, games, and tournaments become so prominent that they push Sunday Mass to second place, we need to remind ourselves of sport's true goal. Also, during the events themselves, do we allow our excitement and competitiveness to prevent us from treating others, parents, coaches, refs, athletes, as the children of God that they are? Winning is good, but it is not the greatest good. And it is a tragedy worse than the sack of Constantinople when we allow sports to take the place of God.